Batman Arkham City, a game in which the player takes on the role of Batman and fights crime, except everyone and everything is crime because an entire section of Gotham has been cordoned off and turned into an incredibly violent, sociopathic prison by a certified lunatic. This was my entry point to the Arkham series because I have a phobia of starting franchises from the beginning apparently. When I first booted up this certified 2011 masterpiece, I'd never played Arkham Asylum, and although now that might seem like one hell of a sin, at the time I was having so much fun I couldn't give a shit. You see, up until 2012, we didn't have an Xbox 360 at my mother's house where I lived. In fact, if I wanted to keep up with the latest and greatest in gaming, I'd have to go visit my dad, who lived 250 miles away, and still does. I don't know why I used the past tense. As far as I'm aware, he's in the same place. But on one fortuitous day, after the recurring painful experience that is the English education system, a 12-year-old me came home to an Xbox 360 having spawned in. And it came with 3 games, all of which I distinctly remember. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, a game I love to pieces, and still play to a modded capacity on and off to this day, as I'm sure you're aware thanks to my recent Skyrim video bonanza. Max Payne 3 that, in hindsight, I was probably a touch too young to really be playing, but I haven't developed a crippling painkiller addiction, nor have I, to my knowledge, joined a drug cartel, so it can't be too bad. And of course, Batman Arkham City. So this game served as my liberation from an outdated generation of consoles, upon which I only played FIFA 2004, slide tackling people to death, and maybe the odd strange game about dinosaurs. Did this mean I could finally sit at the cool kids table? Well, no. But it did mean I didn't have to travel 250 miles just to play a game on a contemporary console. And I know to Americans 250 miles driving is probably nothing, but when you're 12 and legally can't drive, it's a mooch. There was a petition to lower the driving age to 13 in this country. It got about 36 signatures. Wait, 3,927 people thought kids, who on average can't be trusted to walk past a wheelie bin without knocking it over, should be trusted with 2 tons of metal death trap on wheels. That's irrelevant, I just thought I'd mention for some reason. Anyway, I think my point is adequately made that I have an awful lot of time for this game. And since all the videos I've ever dedicated to it in the past are, well, shit, I thought it was time it got the full-on me pretending to be a video essay YouTube channel for a day treatment, because this game certainly deserves its recognition. So with that said, let's begin. Batman Arkham City's premise is very straightforward. You're Batman, and that's cool. What other convincing could you possibly need? Oh, you thought this video was going to display intelligence? Okay then. The plot of Batman Arkham City begins with Bruce Wayne campaigning against the unethical war zone of a prison that is Arkham City. Following the events of Arkham Asylum, it would seem traditional prisons have become outmoded, and so an entire portion of the slums of Gotham City have been turned into a prison by a man named Hugo Strange, or as I like to call him, Bald, who has Bruce Wayne arrested because he can, reveals he knows he's the Batman, and then more or less sets the parameters for the Caped Crusader to be unleashed within this hellhole. It's a prison where inmates are given free rein provided they don't attempt to escape, otherwise they're met with extreme, violent force, meaning it's effectively become a gang war zone. Streets where anything goes, and yet nobody seems to question how Bruce Wayne, a billionaire who probably works in an office, can fight like this. Okay, it's more likely they forgot thanks to blunt force trauma, but you get the point. Bruce Wayne, now an inmate, gets his crime-fighting equipment dropped off, proceeding to suit up and become Batman, complete with the underpants over pants look. I understand that my position as not a reader of comic books is going to ruin my credibility here, but it does look kinda silly. No matter, Batman's objective is to uncover Hugo Strange's plans, a mysterious operation codenamed Protocol 10. That will commence before the night is done, which undoubtedly doesn't bode well for the people of Gotham because nothing ever seems to. This unleashes us on a small, vibrant, atmospheric open world, where Batman is free to shatter the bones of whomever he wishes, as he comes face to face with villains navigating his way to the bottom of this mystery. However, the plot very quickly gains complexity when events lead Batman's investigation to none other than the Joker, who doesn't really have the slightest idea what Protocol 10 might be, but he's more than happy to give us some of his blood. His diseased blood. and if we don't help him find a cure for his ailment, he'll poison Gotham with it. And so getting to the bottom of what's happening here has become an awful lot more complicated, because not only do we still need to figure out what Protocol 10 is before the night is up, but we now also have to find a cure for what I can only assume is AIDS. And this dual plot brings us head to head with many of Arkham City's most famous inmates. Penguin, Solomon Grundy, Ra's al Ghul. I assume he's not an inmate, he's just sort of here. Mr. Freeze, who is honestly terrifying. The list goes on. Each antagonist is characterised colourfully, in a way that both befits them and suits the atmosphere this game is going for, serving as complements to this game's art design, which I'd perhaps argue to be its greatest strength. Even some 13 years down the line, this game looks great, and it isn't down to graphics ahead of its time, but rather the dense atmosphere created by artistic direction. This perfect blend of realism and of course caricature creates an aesthetic that is distinctly Gotham. I must admit, when I first gazed upon the muddy brown-green smoggy skies, it did take me a moment to recognise that I wasn't in Hull, but it's beautiful in its own mucky way, because it conveyed perfectly that Rocksteady were in the business of making art, and it's that passion that trickles down the grapevine to absolutely everything else. It's under this cohesion that things that would otherwise look out of place, like a man who dresses up as a giant bat and wears his underpants on top of his pants, don't just blend in but feel like the norm. A comprehensive art style as flavoursome and textured as this, complete with an excellent casting. We've got Kevin Conroy as the Batman, may he rest in peace, and Mark Hamill as the Joker, who has far too many teeth. And to top it off, we have a spectacular soundtrack, rendering this a fantastic audio-visual experience before you've even taken into consideration narrative and gameplay, which, by the way, both are things to rave about in their own right. You see, gameplay-wise, Batman Arkham City can be summed up with one word: satisfying. Not just in the sense that as the Dark Knight you are a one-man bollock-punching, throat-crushing army. Ah yes, the technique I just used to shatter a man's neck with a car door was non-lethal because I said so. There is time enough to cover that, but first the Batman fantasy begins with the simple things. Gliding around this virtual world. Using the cape to do some much needed gliding is genuinely awesome, and the challenge of trying to stay off of the ground or indeed any surface for as long as possible is even better. It truly gives you this feeling of being able to get anywhere and do anything, and with the implementations of dive bombs and the grapnel boost, this mechanic becomes something of an efficiency challenge within itself. But it isn't merely a means for traversal between point A and point B, it also allows you to take a wider view of Arkham City, to see it from the sky. Not just when static on a rooftop, but also as it passes you by underneath. You can see how this district is built, how one thing rolls into the next. It shows you the decimated, dilapidated buildings, and it also allows you to not run around the streets looking like an idiot. The game wouldn't have functioned without a functional gliding system, and in my opinion it shows with just how well it melds the areas of Arkham City together. Being able to feel like Batman in this world enhances the experience. After all, the idea of Batman running everywhere would be silly. Justice. And then of course using said gliding as a shock and awe tactic to enter combat is fun as fuck. This game's combat is some of the most fun, most engaging of its kind. Because not only is it an incredibly fast-paced counter-combo based system, it also discourages button mashing. This game's combat isn't rooted in point-blank difficulty. After all, you are Batman. You are the human equivalent of a tank with pointy ears. Rather, it's more of a challenge in efficiency. Can you keep the combo up? And how high can you go? How many moves can you deploy? How many tools can you use? How visually diverse can you make an engagement with 20 default thugs, I guess? And of course, how do you adapt to engaging with a mixture of enemy archetypes? Batman Arkham City's combat is not only smooth, but refined. It feels weighted where it counts and light where it's needed. The animations are appealing to look at, mostly. And the ones that aren't because they look bad, they're just a tad dissonant from Batman's no-killing rule. He has no issues shattering bones and brutalizing his opponents, so though Batman is no killer, he's a ruthless combatant no less. As for the tools you can deploy in combat, there aren't too few, and there also aren't too many. Too few variation in combat, and it becomes a bit boring after a bit. Too much variation, and you forget half of the things you can do. Arkham City, in my opinion, balances this just right. And of course, as you go along, you can acquire upgrades that improve the combat experience long term, freshening things up when it's most needed. Sure, that variety also extends to the velocity of the combat at times, which can put you in a pickle every so often because there's no way of telling which animation you're going to get, and some animations are quicker than others, so how long you're exposed is anyone's guess. But the game is quite lenient on animation cancels, so provided you're preemptive enough, this isn't a huge issue. However, as a point to be made for those who haven't played Batman Arkham City, or indeed any Arkham game, to whom I say it's been 13 years, what are you doing? Though the visual of it is bloody good, I don't think it quite conveys just how satisfying it is when you're on a roll. Which I seldom am. No matter, the quality of this game's combat gameplay extends further into the boss fights. The first one against Solomon Grundy is a bit of a champion for Penguin, who doesn't really pose a physical threat himself, is a touch hit and miss admittedly, just sort of diving around 3 vents, occasionally planting explosive gel, and every once in a while you punch the guy a bit. And then you have to dodge Penguin's speed limit abiding rockets before then battering him like you would your average thug. He really poses no threat at all. But the good news is this is probably the worst of the boss fights, and they only really get better from here. The Ra's al Ghul fight is a brilliant artistic piece that sets itself apart by being visually distinct from the rest of the game. Here we have to fight hordes of ninjas who appear to be made of sand, and every so often one of them will transform into Ra's al Ghul and sweep across the screen. So we've got to avoid that too. Then he does some heavy hallucination stuff and we have to dodge his attacks and shock him. Following this, we need to rapidly counter his attacks for a bit, and then rinse repeat a few times. It's a visually distinct fight, and it's also an engaging one. And then of course you lob a batarang at his head. It's a bad day for him. Other boss fights include Mad Hatter, who isn't really part of the main content, but it's a bit of side content that more or less everybody is tricked into doing. You get to wear a funky rabbit hat that makes you look like you drank Ace chemicals, and fight a bunch of generic thugs wearing rabbit masks while on a clock that's falling through what I can only assume is a hallucinated hole of some description, which again really adds to that visual diversity element that these fights really thrive on. Every so often the little hat-wearing lunatic will appear and you've just got to sort of twat him. But what I like about the fights that I've used as examples so far is they use this circular arena format and then adapt it to be visually distinct, which takes something that should start to feel repetitive and then turns it into fun. But none of these examples so far are my favourite fights in the game by any means, nor would I necessarily extend that sentiment to the Clayface fight at the very end of the game. They're all excellent fun fights. But to talk about the best enclosed gameplay boss segment in the game, we need to first turn from the combat and discuss the stealth. You see, if Batman confronted all of his problems head on, he wouldn't be very good at the saving thing. Firstly, because bad guys can take hostages, as is the case in the introductory segment to this mechanic, or should I say avenue of mechanics. But also, if thugs have guns, they'll make short work of your armour and kill you, and you don't want that. The solution therefore is to remain unseen and pick off your foes one by one, dispatching them in stealthy silence. Casing your environment and moving methodically can be just as satisfying as the combat itself. And just like the combat, to get the most out of it, you'll need to use all the skills and tools at your disposal to make it work. However, if you get greedy, or God forbid, impatient, you can be punished for it. Zipping around vantage points, hiding in grids, staying out of the line of sight, thinning the herd one by one, either clearing the room by not letting anybody see you, or working the room until you feel comfortable revealing yourself, or indeed just cheesing a stealth segment on occasion, will require you to actively engage the one thing muscle memory based combat may not always necessarily. I am of course talking about your mind. They don't require you to possess the intellect of Albert Einstein, but you can't switch off either, you've got to be on it. Actively casing the environment, engaging what you can and can't get away with, what you can do unseen, and what you can simply do unnoticed. And if an opportunity fails to present itself, you need to create one using your gadgets, tools, and skill. Arkham City provides a great mixture of situations that require combat, and others that might require a much more subtle approach. And in these moments, you take control of that fear of the unknown that sweeps across the minds of the thugs that you're stalking. They don't just mindlessly accept that they're getting picked off one by one, they run an increasingly frantic commentary on the situation as you go along, and that's a very charming way to immerse you in the experience. And with the way these areas are designed and the enemy archetypes you might face, or rather variations of enemy archetypes you might face, you can't always rely on the same method to sweep every room. Taking up an elevated position on gargoyles is all well and good sometimes, but other times there are enemies with goggles who can see you up there. And if you don't move along quickly after taking somebody out, you'll be noticed. The same can be said for hiding in vents beneath the floors. Should you take someone out there, you might get seen. And this means often you need to take risks, or you'll be there all day. But there's seldom a rule that dictates you need to remain entirely unseen. All in all, the stealth in this game is terrific, and it's through these systems that Arkham City yields its greatest boss battle. In order to find a cure for Joker's, and now Batman's, disease, we need to track down Mr. Freeze, who can only really survive for long periods in sub-zero temperatures, which leads us to the old Gotham City Police Department building, where we learn that he's been taken prisoner by Penguin. So we venture over to the abandoned museum, complete with a T-Rex, fight our way through some gentlemen, including one who appears to have drank too much prime energy, get eaten by a shark a couple of times for shits and giggles, rescue some GCPD officers, destroy a random penguin statuette for talking shit about my mum, and find Freeze being kept as an exhibit of some description by Penguin. Without his suit, he appears to not be a threat. Aside from being blue, he just looks like an ordinary man. However, he can't whip up a cure for Joker's disease without his suit. So we strike a bit of a deal. We give Freeze his suit back, punch a shark in the face repeatedly, wallop Penguin off a balcony, subject his pet zombie to cock and ball torture, wallop Penguin again, and serve him up for Mr. Freeze, who, with his suit once again, no longer bears the visage of a sickly blue man. He's now a big cyborg who has to kneel down for you to speak with him, and his voice is terrifying.
Are you sure this man can provide the missing ingredient?
Anyway, after some science bollocks explanation that makes me wish I paid attention in chemistry, we effectively need to find something that only Ra's al Ghul can provide. So we go and fight him and take his blood. And then we need to return that to John Chili, but not before unravelling a bit of conspiracy with a side dish of interrogating the mayor of Gotham along the way. So, with all the foreplay over, Mr. Freeze creates the cure we need, sticking one vial in a safe and destroying the other to assert his dominance. He demands we rescue his cryogenically frozen wife from the Joker, something I'm sure he knows Batman would do anyway, and so the two tussle.
You don't want to do this, Freeze.
Oh, I believe I do. You will bring me Nora, or you will die.
Now, I want it to be known that I f***ing hate this boss fight, and I mean that in the best possible way, because this is one of this game's most notable high points. Mr. Freeze cannot be attacked head-on, meaning you must resort to stealth, and in this segment he is very much so hunting us down.
You cannot hide in the cold. This world is mine.
And so, in order to beat him in his own domain, you need to sneak up on him a multitude of times. However, this is where the game deploys a stroke of genius. You can't use the same method twice. Mr. Freeze learns, adapting so that whatever you've exploited cannot be exploited a second time, meaning you really have to lean into that stealth repertoire, make note of what you have and haven't done, and await the perfect opportunity to deal some damage. It's a game of intelligence, yours against Mr. Freeze. He learns from his mistakes. Do you?
I learned from my mistakes, Batman. Do you? No!
This stealth boss battle, so to speak, is genuinely the dog's bollocks. There's no corner for you to hide away and cry in, and the amount of times you need to get the drop on Mr. Freeze depends entirely on what difficulty setting you're on. On easy, 3. Normal, 5. Hard, 8. If you're playing New Game Plus, 9. At which point I'd imagine you really have depleted the low-hanging fruit, and will need to start thinking well beyond what's obvious. But of course, in the end, Mr. Freeze is no match for the world's greatest detective, who just so happens to enjoy wearing his underpants on the outside. but it's just the right combination to make you feel a little bit afraid, being honest. Because Mr. Freeze learns from whatever tactics you deploy, it's like he's hunting you, not Batman. Something about that nasal robotic voice dehumanizes him. That heavy metallic suit makes him intimidating to look at, and that inability to retreat to high ground means you need to think fast. Because not only can you not avoid him for any meaningful period of time, he has a variety of means to detect you. Seeker drones that can see you anywhere, the ability to see heat signatures, and he knows where you've been. He can follow your footprints, which after a while he seems to default to only doing. This one stands out among the rest because unlike your bog standard boss battle, where you're more or less in open conflict, you need to be creative to come out on top. You need to think like Batman would. And away from the creepy vibes of a genius who can learn your tactics as you deploy them, chasing you around a freezer wet dream in a mechanical suit that you'd rather be nowhere near when the game requires you to be doing the opposite to what your instincts tell you. The atmosphere in this room is on point. I'm sure it's not an original opinion to refer to this moment as a complete masterstroke, but that's what it is. In fact, I'd go as far as to say it's one of the most memorable moments in the entire Arkham series. Oh, and while we were fighting, Harley Quinn popped by and stole the cure. And when Freeze gets up, he's no longer trying to kill us, which is nice. He gives us a side objective to find his wife if we so wish to, but as far as the main plot is concerned, this is the end of his involvement.
Please, find my wife.
And this seems like a good point to talk about this game's side content. I mean, after we've saved Vicky Vale from an RPG to the helicopter, after which she'll immediately go back to journalist mode. Jesus Christ, give it a rest. Like I've already mentioned, there's the Mad Hatter thing that you'll probably think is main content mistakenly, and understandably so. But of course there's plenty of other side stuff to keep us going as well. Out of curiosity, how long are nights in Gotham? For side content, of course, we can hunt down Deadshot by finding his murder victims, leaning into the detective part of Batman's character to investigate the murders and locate the assassin for hire, culminating in a stealth boss fight that is far less riveting than the Mr. Freeze one we just did. You just have to sneak up on the man and stay out of the sweep of his scope. You can quite literally do it in under 30 seconds. There are also random street crimes where thugs are beating up one of those political prisoners of Hugo Strange's. You just take him out and that's that. The Riddler appears to be on the loose. He's taken hostages and put trophies all around the map that you need to solve puzzles to access. I'm not entirely sure why Batman would want them. He also has informants around the city that you can interrogate.
Don't hurt me! I'll tell you what you want to know!
It's been a pleasure.
The Riddler rooms tend to be fun puzzles, so I like them. They lean into that intelligence aspect. Again, it's important. We can also help Bane destroy some Titan containers dotted around Arkham City for some reason. As a reward for doing it, we get to fight alongside him, and then he reveals he's used us to remove any other Titan containers from throughout the city, leaving him with the only ones. At which point he attacks us, and sadly we get cheated out of a boss fight here too.
No!
I knew I couldn't trust you, Bane, so I used you instead.
I had to take out my frustrations on another Riddler informant.
Tell me what I need to know, or get ready to hurt.
Please don't hurt me! I'll talk!
Of course you will.
Throughout the city we can also find ringing phones. Victor Zsasz has hostages he's preparing to kill, so like any sane serial murderer, he antagonises Batman. And so we have to race to another phone somewhere in Arkham City, so we can attempt to track his call, figure out where he is, and stop him, resulting in a cool navigational segment and another stealth takedown. This is turning out to be one hell of a night's work. We can also visit where Bruce Wayne's parents were murdered, where it all began. We can linger here for as long as we like. It isn't really side content, it's more of an interaction, but I feel as if visiting here is imperative. It reminds you that Batman's parents are indeed dead, in case you forgot, but the elusive Hugo Strange also has some rather interesting dialogue here.
How does it feel, Wayne, to stand on the very stones that ran with your parents' blood? Do you feel sad? Full of rage? Or does that outfit help bury your feelings, hiding your true self? Oh, you are a truly extraordinary specimen. I look forward to breaking you.
Oh yeah, you can find Freeze's wife, by the way. You don't bring her back to him, you just tell him where she is.
I found her, Freeze. She's safe.
Nora, where is she?
She was locked up in Warehouse 5B in the Falcone shipping yard. She's safe, Victor. You can go to her.
Thank you, Batman. I doubted you. I am sorry.
Honestly, after that fight, he's lucky I bothered. Oh no, somebody in Arkham City is stealing people's faces. I'm also yet to mention, and I'm going to mention it now, you can play as Catwoman. Why does she slide like this? Catwoman has her own tools and skills in combat. She's a bit lighter and you'd think that would make her faster, but if anything she's a tad more lethargic than the Caped Crusader himself. It's a nice change of pace for when you get tired of the big brooding bat. And of course there's the odd Catwoman segment peppered throughout the story, but it's nothing hugely special. Her arsenal of skills and tools also aren't as expansive as that of the titular character, which makes sense because you'll be playing as her for far less time. But it's clear effort went in to make Catwoman behave, move and fight entirely different to Batman, lending her a unique feel. The more I talk about it, the more I realise I have no clue why I'm mentioning it here. This dickhead is watching us for reasons we do not know.
We have been given many names, but you will come to know me as Azrael, loyal servant to the Order of Saint Dumas.
Just what I need. Another secret society.
You know what? Contrary to popular belief, I don't frequent many prisons. But this one is fucking bonkers. Don't get me wrong, it's very enjoyable, and I am beyond glad that nights in Gotham seem to last 36 hours. My only criticism of Arkham City's open world really is the design of, well, the map. This inverted U-shape makes getting from A to B a bit of a slog at times, but every piece of content found within ranges from decent to interesting to great. And though it's probably where you'd find Arkham City's weak points, along with some of its strengths of course, that's more of a testament to just how enjoyable the overall game is. I could happily fire this up for a couple hours at a time, only battering inmates guilt-free, so I suppose everything else should be viewed as a bonus. Other side content includes stolen freeze tech, and of course, AR training courtesy of the Batcomputer that allows us to access the grapnel boost, so don't miss that. Because it's the kind of tool, the moment you start using it, you'll feel naked without it. From the menu, you also have challenge maps, in which you can opt to play as Batman, Catwoman, Robin, or indeed Nightwing. I'd show you more of that, but for some reason, when I booted it up, my frame rate began to tank like the pound under Liz Truss. But there we go, side content and that. I suppose if you really want to stretch, there's enjoyment to be had out of just simply listening to the dialogue in the open world, whether it be announcements from Hugo Strange or conversations between inmates. Through this we can learn an awful lot. There are also a few missable interactions that are definitely worth looking for. For instance, the calendar man in the basement to the courthouse. You can interact with him as both Catwoman and Batman, and he's a bit of an odd fellow to say the least. But with all of that adequately covered, let's move on. To continue the plot with Mr. Freeze adequately finessed and the Joker now in possession of the cure, there's only one thing to do. Head to the Joker's funland and try and get some of that cure so we don't, die. And after traipsing through some bits, we discover that the Joker has started a YouTube channel.
Hello YouTube, today we've got an epic prank. We're making mustard gas.
And then we link up with him and have a fight. Not really a boss fight, just an arena with Joker in the mix, who can't be knocked out until, well, the end. The big guy with one arm, some green hair and a massive hammer shows back up and somebody lobs a chair at us, and we bump into another Prime Energy addict. Then Talia al Ghul shows up and promises the Joker immortality. How stupid can you be? She gives him a sword because apparently his chin wasn't sharp enough. Batman takes one last glimpse at Anonkers for some reason and then passes out under some rubble. Enter a Catwoman segment where she sort of zips about and attempts to escape Arkham City, choosing only to return to save the Bat. Having discovered that Protocol 10 is a plot to eliminate the inmate population of Arkham City, So Hugo Strange can be heralded as the hero that the Batman couldn't be, the world's greatest detective has no choice but to venture forth to the tower and stop that. The skyline is now dotted with helicopters firing missiles. Where does the private militia that runs this place get the money to have so many helicopters? These things aren't cheap. Now I do get the point this is trying to convey. Strange is killing people rather indiscriminately. Sure, they're criminals, sure they're horrible people on average, but however bad the average inmate of Arkham City is, Batman cannot stand for it. His moral code does not permit that he kill or allow anyone to be killed. Not that he's always 100% in touch with that over the course of the game. He doesn't kill anyone, but there are plenty of instances where he isn't trying as hard to save people as he perhaps might, and he has no problem dispensing a fate worse than death. But no matter, some helicopter scanning, followed by some helicopter evasion later, we find ourselves at the base of the tower, where we can work our way up and face Hugo Strange, who has been quite absent, outside of his voice for the most part throughout the game, but it's a short game, so we'll allow it.
Stop right there, Batman. We need to talk. And I know you wouldn't be able to live with yourself if your actions caused this poor man to die. I have a question for you. Before my arrival, this city was drowning under attack.
Stay where you are! Stay where you are! Anyway,
Have you ever considered that all this is your fault? Your presence creates these animals. Like germs, they spread. You created the environment that allowed the germ to mutate, to become stronger. Look at the Joker. Would he even exist if not for you? It must be depressing. All your sacrifices, and yet you are the one to blame. Oh, this is beautiful. We have at long last defeated the great Batman. Soon, you will take my rightful place at my master's side. We will rule over this world. So thank you, Batman, for all your help. Now, kill him.
And now we get a bucket load of context to what Hugo Strange is doing. He's aiming to succeed Batman in a way by doing the one thing he cannot do, which is stop the threats once and for all, that he argues only get worse due to the fact that Batman does not kill them when they arise. His critique would probably land on stronger feet if he didn't also mention he aims to dominate the world with his master, whoever that is. I'm sure we'll find out. But the main takeaway is a bit of food for thought with regards to where this game's true ending is going to go, of course being the Joker. Is it time that Batman finally puts an end to him? Or does he continue, as Hugo Strange would argue, to allow him to fester? These are interesting questions to propose to us more than anything. It's unclear if they've even chipped Batman's rock-solid mentality. After all, he doesn't strike me as the kind of man who listens to a fellow lacking scalp hair. So after clearing a few rooms in classic Batman fashion, we head up the tower's lift to confront John Odd, and hopefully put an end to his world domination scheme before it's even begun. Sapling. After a windy, chilly climbing segment to the highest point for miles around, we finally come face to face with Hugo Strange's goons. We get a final stealth segment here where we must clear the room before confronting Strange, because obviously Strange is a science guy of some description. I doubt he'd pose much of a threat within himself, and with that we get the final confrontation we were after. Strange is fairly composed in the face of getting folded like a camping chair, and Batman has Oracle shut Protocol 10 down. Batman proceeds to rag the bold man around a bit more because it's fun, but before terribly long his master is revealed.
Strange!
Your part in this is over, Professor Strange.
Why?
Oh, a plot twist. Ra's al Ghul's been behind it all along. I sense a rematch coming. Before we get too excited though, Strange activates Protocol 11, self-destructing the tower in wake of his betrayal, sending Batman and Ra's al Ghul plummeting to the streets below. Ra's al Ghul impales himself for some reason, and then lands on a spike as insult to injury. He'll be fine. And Batman, who can glide, lives. I mean, I'm not sold on Hugo Strange as an antagonist, I'll admit, and the plot twist It didn't result in a fight of any description, it was just a cutscene. I suppose at that point in the game it is a formality, as the ending is yet to be, well, done. He serves his purpose down to a T, the evil warden of this messed up prison. But unlike every other villain portrayed in this game, he doesn't really get an opportunity to shine. Not properly. But it's not like he just exists. His voice is taunting in its presence. And the very prison in itself, which is a character in its own right, is an extension of his own reprehensible personality. Lacking a bit of wow factor, though noticeable, isn't the biggest sin in the world, I suppose. But with him, I presume, exploded, we now have the Joker to deal with. Or as it turns out after annihilating some snipers, just a man who's able to look like the Joker. It appears he's turned on Talia and is now using her to try to get at us. Excellent. She uses those slick assassin techniques to seemingly kill him. However, 2 cutscene endings to this gameplay-oriented masterpiece seems too easy. Something's not right here. And sure enough, Batman realises that it wasn't the Joker he's been dealing with, it's Clayface and the Joker, which he doesn't realise in time to save Talia. And so the final boss fight of the game is Clayface, a giant, gangly ball of poo, whom we have to throw freeze blasts at, courtesy of Mr. Freeze, and then slice up with a sword that for the most part is lodged in his body for this first part. His second phase consists of poo hammers, followed by us promptly slicing him to pieces. Hardly the hardest thing in the world, but I always find the best place for the hardest boss fight in any given game is not at the end anyway. Joker detonates the theatre floor, sending us and Clayface to a floor below somewhere, where we take on another form of this boss fight. And it's here where things get really bloody satisfying really quickly. To face off against Clayface and his defecation minions, we get to use the sword in open conflict. Which, honestly, it's just spectacular. Why doesn't Batman use a sword more often, aside from the obvious that it kills people? I mean, you could make it just cut off hands and legs and things like that, or maybe just not look. Then you can say that you haven't killed someone when you might have. Batman with a sword, it's just sick. The third phase of this battle gives us a great opportunity to chef up some people who aren't really people with no moral consequences. Not only that, it makes sure the final bit of gameplay in the game feels unique somehow, and that's important. And with Clayface frozen, Batman dives into his body and jumps out with the cure. Finally, at long last, he has his hands on the affliction Joker gave him towards the beginning of the game. He quickly swigs it and then prevents Joker from diving into a Lazarus pit and becoming immortal, using the same philosophy of how to clog a toilet. You fill it with poo. And with that, Joker's only hopes of survival rest in a half-drunk vial.
Quick! The cure! What are you waiting for? Come on! I killed your girlfriend, poisoned Gotham and hell. It's not even breakfast. But so what? We all know you'll save me.
Every decision you've ever made ends with death and misery. People die. I stop you. You'll just break out and do it again.
Think of it as a running gag. No! Are you happy now?
Do you want to know something funny? Even after everything you've done, I would have saved you.
That actually is pretty funny.
Despite Hugo Strange's attempts to critique Batman's no-killing rule and to break his moral code, at the end Batman would have saved Joker, but the Joker is the one who ultimately sealed his own fate. A moment likely caused, or at least aggravated from Batman's perspective by his own hesitation, his own wavering in his beliefs, are what cost this maniac, this clown, his life. And thus he walks out of the prison with his antithesis in his arms, in silence. Not because he mourns the Joker's death in particular, but because he himself is not an awfully mentally well individual. His no-killing rule isn't a moral code, it's a manifestation of that trauma he experienced when he watched his parents be shot and killed when he was just a boy. When he has the power to save a life and fails, he's brought back to this place, this alley, this moment that defined his life forever. And so his commitment to saving lives is ultimately what stabilizes him. And so it's not surprising his perceived failure to do so in this instance would have a profound effect on him. It makes Arkham City's ending a rather beautiful, if not sad one, because even though Batman saved countless lives, from his point of view, he failed. And that is how this excellent game concludes. There are some other endgame bits and pieces. For instance, now you can change suits, or at least skins, as they don't necessarily adhere to the same art style. And you can enjoy New Game Plus looking however you fancy within reason. Some look more in place than others. There's also some Catwoman content collecting stuff that was taken from your apartment when it was blown up or something. It's just filling a meter, it's not awfully interesting, I have to be honest. And that's all there is to really be talking about with regards to Batman Arkham City these long 13 years later. What a fantastic experience. Truly incredible. It's got that sick blend of excellent gameplay, satisfying gliding for instance, smooth combat, stealth to die for, an impactful story, and who could forget the atmospheric world building done through visuals, audio, and the very structuring of the world that no matter where or when you are, there's always something to overhear, something to find, an interaction to have, side content to do. Arkham City to this day is splendid in just how well-rounded it is, and it's been refreshing to revisit after having not played it for a good few years. So I suppose I'll have to now do a video in this vein on the other Arkham games. And if you'd be interested in that, I'd first like to thank you for watching this. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff. It would of course be massively appreciated. And of course, if you'd like to see more on the Arkham series, let me know in the comments. But with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, please take care and goodbye.